Well, we're going to keep rocking and rolling here. We're going to welcome our first keynote this morning, Michael Karapetian, who's going to talk about zero waste solutions and overall reduction from earthday.org. Please welcome our opening keynote this morning, Michael Karapetian from Earth Day. Thank you.
Awesome. How are you guys doing today?
Good.
Good. Cool. All right, I can take this right off. Do I use spacer right here to? Perfect. Of course. No worries, no worries. Well, good to be here, guys. As they mentioned, I'm Michael Karapetian from earthday.org, and I lead the Great Global Cleanup at the organization. And in my job, what I do is I work with thousands of cleanup organizations and, of course, zero waste organizations from all around the world. My job is to give them the resources and tools that they need to be able to make an impact in the work that they do. So before I jump into more about the Great Global Cleanup, I want to talk a little bit about earthday.org. Earthday.org started back in 1970 with the very first Earth Day, where 20 million Americans marched across the United States demanding for their leaders and their governments to make changes to protect the environment. And this very first Earth Day that started April 22nd was a reaction to several years and several decades of poor management of the environment. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring was released about a decade prior. And then, of course, in 1969, there was the Santa Barbara oil spills, which devastated many of the beaches in California. And so earthday.org, the very first Earth Day, was a reaction to that, along with the anti-war movement that was happening in the 1970s as well. So fast forward 55 years, we're about to celebrate our 55th anniversary. Sweet, thank you, guys. And today we still have that mission and that passion to carry on what happened 55 years ago. And our mission is to diversify, educate, activate the environmental movement worldwide, and to bring the environmental movement together so that we can be a powerful force of change in the world. So earthday.org does a lot of different work, but one of the campaigns is the Great Global Cleanup. Now, who here has done a cleanup before?
Sunday.
Sunday, exactly. So pretty much everybody, which I would expect nothing less at a zero waste conference.
Michael, want to stand right in front of the podium.
Oh, perfect.
Visible and not hit by the light.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I want to tell you guys about one of the first cleanups that I did. So I started doing cleanups in college. I was interning for an organization called National Cleanup Day. And some of you are probably familiar with the founders, Steve Jewett and Bill Willoughby. And so I got this internship and I said, all right, guys, like, what do you want me to do? And they said, I don't know, like, go pick up trash, like, leave me alone. So I went and I started picking up trash and I started making, right here, perfect. Oh, because the camera, there we go. So I started picking up trash, started doing cleanups. And one of the first cleanups that I did is I went to this park in Gainesville, Florida, because I was at University of Florida at the time. Sweet, yes. So I went to this park, and when I walked up, I saw this sign that said, no swimming, high levels of fecal matter. Like, well, it wasn't an issue. I wasn't planning on going swimming. I was there to pick up trash. So I started doing my cleanup and everything. And of course, I saw this styrofoam cup on the side of the bank, and I wasn't going to let that slide. I had to go pick it up. And it was like just there on the side of the river where all that fecal matter was, I guess. And so I went to go pick it up. It was one of those like big gulps that you get at like 7-Eleven or something like that. And as I reached in to grab it, of course, I put my foot on the one non-stable branch, and I slipped and I fell straight into the river full of fecal matter. And but that didn't stop me. I of course went home and took a shower, but I love doing cleanups, and I still do cleanups as often as I can. I work with organizations doing cleanups all over the world. So one river full of poop did not stop me. So these are the numbers of the last 5 years of doing cleanups through the Great Global Cleanup. We have had over 30,000 cleanups done. We've worked with 16 million volunteers, and we've removed 176 million pounds of waste from the environment. And what I love about the global cleanup movement is that the organizations that we work with, first of all, for volunteers, it is often the very first thing that they do to get involved in the environmental movement, because they're not really thinking about, hey, we need to solve climate change or fighting plastic pollution. They just want to get involved and do something about their community and take care of their community and protect their family, protect their health, and maybe just meet people around them. So on top of that, the cleanup organizations and many of the ones that we work with, they're often the cornerstone environmental movement in the community that they're in, because they have the connections to the local government, they have connections to volunteers, they have connections to businesses. And from there is where the environmental movement exists in their communities. So the organizations we work with are in a very powerful position. But of course, as much as I love cleanups, there's an issue. So we pick up 176 million pounds over the last 5 years. Every year, over 400 million tons of plastic is produced annually. And we know that half of that is single use, which we've all done cleanups. We know that is what we're picking up at those cleanups. And of course, if the industry trends continue, by 2050, 1 billion tons of plastic is going to be produced every single year. And that is a number that, quite frankly, we just can't keep up with. It's too much plastic. But cleanup organizers, we know this. We know that, which is why we are in a very unique position. So I want to go over the last 55 years very briefly of the environmental movement to kind of showcase how we got to this point where so many people kind of think that cleanups themselves are the solution, and the fingers are pointing at us that we need to pick up this trash. So, overview of the environmental movement. I'm starting on April 22nd, 1970, very first Earth Day, the birth of the modern environmental movement, at least according to us, and I think we might be a little biased, but that's okay. So after April 22nd, after that first Earth Day, where 20 million Americans marched across the United States, the EPA was established, Clean Air Act was established, and the Clean Water Act was also passed. But there was also this other movement happening where these industries who created a lot of the trash and the pollution started feeling the pressure. And of course, we all know the Keep America beautiful crying Indian commercial where a Native American saw all the pollution happening in the environment and he shed a single tear. But commercials like that, they pointed the blame right back at the individual, saying that it's our job to clean up. All right, fast forward. 1980, Superfund Act. The United States started taxing chemical and petrochemical industries to fund cleanups of toxic waste sites. So there's this win for systematic change, but also why is there toxic waste sites in the first place? 1988, recycling programs started to blow up, and then of course the resin identification code became extremely popular, which allowed us to know what type of plastic we're working with. But for the average consumer, it basically just made us think that every single piece of plastic was recyclable, which is far from true. 1997, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch was discovered during a yacht race. There was a race from Hawaii to California, and one of the captains discovered this soup of plastic that needed to be studied to figure out how it got there. The first national plastic ban happened in Bangladesh, which was a win for the systematic change piece. Inconvenient Truth came out, of course, in 2005. And then 2008, World Cleanup Day was launched. 50,000 people cleaned up over 10,000 tons of trash, 5 hours. Thank you, Julia. She was there on that very first day. And then when we get to the 2010s, this idea of focus on the natural environment, that video that we've all seen of the plastic straw in the turtle's nose, struck a chord with millions of people around the world. And there was this huge focus on how plastic is impacting the environment and how we can solve that issue. And then of course, in 2019, China's national sword policy happened. We were shipping a lot of our trash. There's this number floating around, 9% of the plastic that we produce is recycled. Turns out a lot of that number actually goes into what we ship out to other countries to deal with, including China prior to 2019 until they stopped it. After that, we had to start shipping to Malaysia, Indonesia, and several other countries around the world. But that 9% is likely way smaller than that because, well, once it's shipped off to another country, we often count that into the number, that 9% number. So in the last 5 years, the shift switched to our own personal health. The INC started the International Negotiating Committee to create a legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. Was first one started in 2022. They've had 5 meetings since, and they still haven't come up with a treaty. But a lot of the negotiations here has been between limiting production of plastics and then focusing on what we'll call false solutions, such as advanced recycling. And then in 2024, we launched our theme. We choose a theme every single year, and our theme was Planet versus Plastics. And with that, we called for a 60% reduction in plastic production by 2040. But we also started sitting down with scientists and researchers who are focusing on the health impacts of plastic pollution. And within that, we realized there's a lot of impacts on plastic pollution. And a lot of this research started coming out. I'm sure you're all started to see all those articles and different research come out about how plastic is in every single part of our body and how it is killing us, potentially killing us. It's always linked. But as Sammy said, we're in the research and identification part of a phase of this research. So here's where we're at today, planet versus plastic. As I said, the theme was to focus on the health impacts of plastic pollution and call for reduction in plastic production, because that is the only way that we are actually going to get out of this issue. What are the health impacts of plastic pollution? Well, unfortunately, though I'm sure you're all aware, if not, bad news, microplastics and nanoplastics have been found in every single part of our bodies. In our blood, our lungs, and even our brain. Nanoplastics are small enough that they can pass through the blood-brain barrier and get into our brain. Now, these diseases are not only linked to microplastics, but the chemicals that are in plastics that make plastic what it is. And these are they're called plasticizers. They make plastic rigid, transparent, or whatever we need them to do. These plasticizers, about 16,000 of them, and 4,000 of them at this point have been proven to be detrimental to our health. So some of these diseases, some of these chemicals are BPA and phthalates, which are endocrine disruptors, and they disrupt our hormonal cycles in our body, which can lead to fertility issues. They've been linked to declining sperm count and reproductive disorders. Also, learning disabilities in children, as well as dementia. There was a study that came out where that studied several different brains, and the brains of patients that had dementia had higher levels of microplastics in their brain than those who didn't. And then, of course, many of those chemicals are carcinogenic and causing several different kinds of cancers. So there's a lot to be alarmed about. But despite the fact that cleanups are one of the tools that the cleanup organizations use, we know that this is not enough. We're aware that these one-off events and this individual action isn't enough to solve this, but of course it's a tool to get people into the environmental movement. But we know this. We know that systematic change is necessary, and we know that we got to go beyond these these surface level efforts. But as I said, cleanup organizations and zero waste organizations and these local environmental orgs are often that cornerstone organization in their communities, and they are uniquely positioned to connect not only the organizations around them, but the local governments and the local businesses to create the change that they want to see in their community and in their world. So I want to give some examples of some organizations we've worked with in the past. Makor is a youth group in Armenia, and we worked with them and did several cleanups with them last year. And the founders, they just started doing cleanups because, well, they noticed that a lot of the country had a lot of pollution. But that grew into a movement that spread across the entire country. Not only do they do cleanups, but they also started an environmental center in downtown Yerevan, which is the capital. And they work with the municipality as well as the national government on environmental change. Planet Matters in Austria, the founder, Felix Krainer, he was scuba diving, and he saw how much plastic was there, so he decided to do something about it, and he created an online movement that now has over 3 million followers on TikTok. And he started working with local schools in Austria to teach students about sustainability, about plastics, and about different change. And then, of course, Raleigh, North Carolina, which I think is a really interesting one. They created a program called the Workforce, where they hired those who were experiencing homelessness, and they pay them $18 an hour to come out and do a cleanup. And so they get us a little extra money to get them off the street for the night, get some food, or reconnect with family. And the city loved the program so much that they funded them for the next 5 years, continuing that project. And we're working with them again this year. And then, of course, us having conversations like this, where we can join together, share ideas, is part of the reason why the environmental movement is so strong. So we chose another theme this year, as we do every year. And originally, as we were talking about this theme, we wanted to focus on renewable energy. We wanted to triple renewable energy by 2030, which of course is extremely important, not only for the economic reasons, and how bringing in these industries into your communities can benefit economically, but also because they can protect the health of people, and getting rid of coal and incinerators, and that side of it is extremely beneficial. But there's also this piece of the theme that focused on the power that people have, the power that we have in our communities to create the change that we want. So I want to focus on that, because as 2025 started, as we all know, and as we all heard yesterday, there were several, let's just say the national government started pulling out of several different environmental commitments and policies. And not only governments, but also large corporations and international organizations. But I think this is a good time to remind ourselves that the work that we do as cleanup organizations or zero waste organizations is that we always, and we still, despite what happens at the national, international level, we still have the agency to create the change that we want in this world. Because despite governments pulling out and federal agencies such as the EPA being defunded and slashed, this movement, the environmental movement, has never waited for the government to do anything. So, as a reminder, the mandate of our movement, the work that cleanup organizations and zero waste organizations are extremely important, because we are not just picking up trash out of a river, and we're not just diverting waste from going to a landfill, but we are building power in the communities that we live in by organizing. We are giving the power back to the communities to be able to create the change that they want to see in the world. Thank you.